You are operating under a delusion that will kill you. The history of modern survival is a graveyard filled with tacticians who believed that if they could not be seen, they could not be hit. That logic expired the moment thermal imaging miniaturized and attached itself to a rotary wing. You are still thinking in the visible spectrum. You obsess over multi-cam patterns, ghillie suits, and shadow discipline, treating the drone overhead as if it were a hawk searching for a field mouse. It is not a hawk. It is a flying computer processing a multispectral feed. It does not look for shapes. It looks for contrast. It calculates differentials in radiation. Your camouflage cream is useless against a sensor that measures the thermal emissivity of your skin against the background radiation of the Earth. The sky has become a relentless, unblinking eye that strips away the foliage and reveals the heat signature of your blood. Understanding this is not an academic exercise. It is the absolute baseline for remaining biological. If you cannot defeat the algorithm, you are already a casualty. The first and most pervasive myth is the sanctuary of the deep canopy. This is layout 1, the green roof fallacy. You trek deep into the dense old-growth forest, believing that 3 layers of leaves and branches creates an impenetrable shield against aerial observation. You pitch your camp under the thickest oak, confident that the drone's camera sees only a continuous carpet of green. In the visible spectrum, you are correct. To a standard RGB camera, you are invisible, but a thermal sensor does not see green. It sees heat. And the forest canopy does not block heat. It manages it, often in ways that betray you. When you camp under dense foliage, you create a thermal trap. Your body heat, your breath, and the residual warmth of your equipment rise and pool against the underside of the canopy. On a cool night, this creates a faint but detectable heat island effect, a localized warming of the leaves directly above you that stands out against the ambient cold of the surrounding forest. Furthermore, you fundamentally misunderstand the capability of modern thermal optics. You are banking on the drone using cheap, low-resolution industrial sensors. You must assume the adversary is equipping assets with sensors boasting a noise-equivalent temperature difference of less than 30 millikelvins. These sensors are sensitive enough to detect the thermal footprint of a footprint itself seconds after you have walked away. They do not need a clear line of sight to your entire body. They need only a fraction of a % of thermal variance. The canopy is not a solid lead sheet. It is a sieve. There are thousands of microgaps between the leaves. As the drone moves, its perspective shifts, allowing the sensor to peer through these varying angles. The software integrates these glimpses over time. It sees a flash of heat here, a warm patch there, and the algorithm stitches these data points together to identify a biological anomaly. You are not hiding. You are merely fragmenting your signature, and the machine is excellent at reassembling the pieces. The danger creates a false sense of security. You hear the drone high above, you look up, and you see nothing but leaves. You assume the blockage is reciprocal. It is not. The drone is looking at a high-contrast environment. The leaves at night cool down rapidly, dropping to ambient air temperature. Your body remains a constant furnace at 37 degrees Celsius. In the thermal spectrum, the forest is a dark gray wash of cold static, and you are a burning white beacon shining through the cracks. Even if the canopy is perfect, the heat bloom from a small stove or even a group of huddled bodies can warm the trunk of the tree you are sleeping against, creating a vertical thermal pillar that looks entirely unnatural in the woodline. You have built a coffin out of trees because you refuse to understand the physics of the spectrum. You relied on the visual barrier, ignoring the thermal permeability. You believe the Earth is your ally. You have been trained on the doctrine of the trench and the foxhole, convinced that putting dirt between you and the enemy is the ultimate defensive posture. This is the logic of ballistics, not surveillance. In the era of thermal optics, the ground is not a shield. It is a canvas, and you are painting a beacon upon it. Layout 2, the dugout spider hole, represents a catastrophic failure of understanding soil thermodynamics. You dig in to hide your silhouette, but the very act of digging creates a thermal scar that is visible from thousands of feet in the air long after you have concealed yourself. The physics of this failure are absolute. The surface of the earth, the crust, maintains a specific temperature and moisture content based on exposure to the sun and wind. The soil just 6 inches beneath that crust exists in a completely different thermal state. It is cooler, wetter, and denser. When you break the ground to dig your spider hole, you bring this subsurface soil to the top. You overturn the natural thermal layering. To a drone's thermal sensor, this overturned earth does not look like dirt. It looks like a radiant wound. The moisture in the fresh soil changes its emissivity and thermal inertia. Even if you expertly camouflage the position with leaves and branches, the surrounding area where you scattered the spoil pile glows with a different thermal intensity than the undisturbed ground. You have created a localized anomaly that screams artificial disturbance. This thermal scar acts as a temporal marker. You assume that once the hole is dug and you are inside, you are safe. You ignore the persistence of the signature. That overturned soil retains heat and releases it at a different rate than the surrounding vegetation. At dusk, when the surface cools rapidly, your spoil pile holds on to the day's heat longer, or conversely stays cooler if it is damp clay, creating a high contrast patch that can last for days. A drone operator does not need to see you in the hole. They only need to see the evidence of the hole. The algorithm highlights the anomaly, coordinates are logged, and the artillery does the rest. You are dead before you even hear the prop spin. Furthermore, you fail to account for the contrast differential of the cold earth trap. You believe being underground masks your body heat. In reality, the thermal backdrop of the earth, often significantly colder than the ambient air at night, creates a pristine, uniform background against which your body heat is magnified. If your spider hole has even the slightest gap for observation or ventilation, the heat from your body vents upward like a chimney. Against the consistent low-temperature background of the soil, that venting heat appears as a sharp, defined hot spot. There is zero thermal clutter to confuse the sensor. By surrounding yourself with cold earth, you have removed the very noise that might have hidden you. You have framed yourself in a border of cold, making your heat signature the only variable in the equation. You believe that dispersion is safety. This is a legacy tactic from the age of unguided munitions, where a single mortar round could wipe out a clustered squad. In the age of algorithmic surveillance, Layout 3, the scattered perimeter, is not a defensive measure. It is a data-feeding strategy. You deliberately spread your gear, your sleeping positions, and your supplies across a 50-meter radius, convinced that this clutter will overwhelm the observer or make the camp look like random natural debris. You are fighting a human observer who gets tired, but you are being hunted by software that never blinks and processes pixel arrays faster than you can think. The drone does not see clutter. It sees geometry. It utilizes edge detection algorithms designed specifically to isolate unnatural shapes from the fractal chaos of nature. A rucksack, a rifle, a square water can. These objects possess straight lines, 90-degree angles, and perfect circles. Nature does not build in Euclidean geometry. It builds in fractals. When you scatter these objects, you are not hiding them. You are increasing the statistical probability of detection. You are expanding your detection surface area. If you keep your gear in a single, well-masked pile, the drone has one small anomaly to miss. When you scatter 10 items, you give the algorithm 10 separate chances to register a positive on an edge detection scan. It only takes one hit to trigger a region of interest alert for the operator. Furthermore, you fundamentally misunderstand the nature of randomness. The human brain is incapable of true randomness. When you scatter your gear, you unconsciously place items at regular intervals, creating a pattern of equidistant spacing that algorithms are trained to spot. You create a constellation of tactical debris. The software analyzes the spatial relationship between these heat sources. It sees a heat bloom, sleeper, here, a cold geometric square, ammo can, 5 meters away, and a linear cold object, rifle, 3 meters from that. It connects the dots. The noise you try to create is processed, filtered, and recognized as a camp signature. You have not created camouflage, you have created a verified target complex. You are addicted to the path of least resistance. This biological laziness is what kills you on the high ground. Layout 4, the linear ridgeline, is the default movement pattern for exhaustion. You climb to the crest of the hill or the spine of the mountain because the ground is flatter, the vegetation is thinner, and the navigation is linear. You trade tactical masking for physical convenience. In doing so, you elevate yourself into the most dangerous geometric zone on the battlefield, the skyline. You believe that because you are high up, you command the terrain. You do not. You have merely placed yourself on a pedestal for sensors that are looking specifically for the disruption of the horizon. The physics of the skyline are unforgiving. To a drone looking from an oblique angle, the horizon is the boundary between the terrestrial Earth and the empty sky. This boundary offers the highest possible visual and thermal contrast. In the visible spectrum, your silhouette breaks the continuous line of the ridge. You become a jagged, moving tooth on a flat edge. But the thermal spectrum is where this error becomes fatal. The sky, especially at high altitudes or on clear nights, acts as a backdrop of near-infinite cold. It is a void. When you walk the ridgeline, you are projecting your 37 degrees Celsius thermal signature against a background that can register at minus 40 degrees or lower. You are not just visible, you are blazing. You are a neon flare against a black void. There is no background clutter to absorb your emissions. No trees, no rocks, no warm earth. Just you and the cold abyss. Furthermore, you are triggering the linearity trap. Drone algorithms prioritize linear scanning because nature rarely produces long, straight lines of movement. When you traverse a ridge line, you are moving in a predictable vector. You are drawing a straight line on the map. The drone's software recognizes this vector immediately. It does not need to identify you as a human instantly. It only needs to identify the behavior of the heat source. A heat source moving at 4 kilometers per hour in a straight line along a topographic crest is classified as a patrol. You have removed the variable of chaos from your movement. The targeting computer can calculate your pace, your direction, and your likely destination 10 minutes in advance. It can align an orbital loiter or a mortar solution simply by extending the line you are already walking. You convince yourself that the ridge offers better observation. You tell yourself you can see the enemy coming. This is 20th century thinking. The enemy is not hiking up the hill to meet you. The enemy is a distinct black dot on a screen 5 kilometers away. By taking the high ground, you have isolated yourself from the noise of the valley floor. You have separated yourself from the interference of the deep woods. You have voluntarily stepped onto the stage, spotlighted by your own heat. moving in a straight line towards your own destruction. The ridgeline is not a vantage point. It is a shooting gallery. You retreat to the primal safety of the cave. This is an instinct as old as the species, driven by the desire for hard cover and overhead protection. In a kinetic firefight with small arms, a cave is an excellent fortress. In a thermal surveillance environment, Layout 5, the cave mouth, is a geological spotlight. You are relying on rock to hide you, but you are forgetting that a cave is effectively a giant lung that breathes temperature. By hiding inside, you are placing yourself at the focal point of a massive thermal exchange that is visible from altitudes where the rock itself looks like flat paper. The physics of the black body radiator are what condemn you here. A cave maintains a relatively constant internal temperature, usually the average annual temperature of the region, often between 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. The outside air, however, fluctuates wildly between day and night. This creates a lethal differential. At dawn and dusk, the thermal crossover periods, the contrast becomes absolute. Just before dawn, the external terrain is at its coldest point. The air inside the cave is significantly warmer. This warm air does not stay inside. It flows out the mouth of the cave, driven by convection currents. To a thermal sensor, this is not a hole in the rock, it is a jet engine exhaust. You have a massive glowing plume of warm air erupting from the hillside, marking the exact entrance to your hideout. Conversely, during the heat of the day, the cave breathes cold air outward. If the drone is operating in black-hot polarity, where heat is dark and cold is white, the cave mouth appears as a brilliant white void against the sun-baked dark terrain. You cannot mask this. It is a function of atmospheric pressure and thermodynamics. You can extinguish every fire, sit perfectly still, and cover yourself in space blankets, but you cannot stop the mountain from breathing. The sheer volume of air exchange creates a signature that is orders of magnitude larger than a human body. You are hiding inside a thermal beacon the size of a garage door. Furthermore, the geometry of the cave mouth acts as a black body cavity. In physics, a cavity with a small opening is the most perfect absorber and emitter of radiation. The interior of the cave traps thermal energy and re-radiates it efficiently through the opening. When a sensor sweeps across a cliff face, it sees a uniform texture of rock until it hits the cave mouth. There, the emissivity changes drastically. The depth of the cave creates a thermal void, an area of uniform, unvarying temperature that looks artificially flat compared to the noisy, textured thermal return of the exterior rock. This flatness is an anomaly. Algorithms flag it immediately. You are not safe deep inside the Earth. You are merely cornered in a dead-end trap that has broadcast its location to every sensor in the stratosphere. The era of static concealment is over. To hide is to die. You must transition to the doctrine of thermal equilibrium. The objective is not to block your signature, it is to match the baseline radiation of your environment. You are no longer a soldier, you are a thermodynamic equation that must balance to zero. This requires a fundamental psychological shift from hiding to blending. Hiding implies a separation from the environment, creating a void or a blockage that advanced sensors can detect as an anomaly. Blending implies becoming a constituent part of the thermal background. You must stop trying to be invisible and start striving to be indistinguishable from the noise. The drone is looking for a signal. Your only defense is to become the static. You must master the specific physics of thermal masking. It is not about blocking. It is about insulation and dissipation. A space blanket taped to your body is a suicide wrap. It conducts your heat to its surface, which then radiates as a perfect human shape. You must build a convection barrier. You require a standoff distance and air gap between your heat source and your thermal shield. The outer layer of your concealment must float independently of your body, allowed to remain at the ambient temperature of the air while trapping your radiant energy inside the void. This requires a double-layer system where the inner layer reflects heat back to the source and the outer layer matches the emissivity of the terrain. If the outer shell heats up, you have failed. The surface temperature of your gear must be identical to the surface temperature of the rock or bush next to you. Simultaneously, you must enforce shape disruption. You must delete Euclidean geometry from your existence. The human form is a specific collection of thermal vectors that AI is trained to recognize. You must mask the head and shoulders, the T-shape of the torso. You do not just wear camouflage, you construct a thermal breakup pattern using materials with different emissivity rates. You mix cold synthetic fabrics with warm natural vegetation to create a chaotic thermal texture that creates false edges for the algorithm. You must disrupt the aspect ratio of the human silhouette. A drone looks for a height-to-width ratio of approximately 3.1. You must alter this ratio by extending your width or reducing your height, effectively corrupting the data packet the sensor receives. Your survival is no longer a question of grit or luck. It is a discipline of applied physics. The drone does not hate you. It merely solves for X. If X is a heat differential greater than 0.5 degrees, you are a target. If X is 0, you are the background. Stop looking for a place to hide. Start calculating your thermal budget. The only thing that separates the survivor from the casualty is the refusal to be a variable in the machine's equation. You must exist in the negative space of the thermal spectrum. This is not a game of hide and seek. It is a mathematical proof. Ensure your variables cancel out or you will be subtracted.